I'll turn it over to you, Andres.
Great. Well, first of all, very honored to be with you. Let's start with the Minister of Modernization of Argentina, Andres Ibarra. Andres, what is a Minister of Modernization? What does a Minister of Modernization do? What's your job?
You didn't use the word that I told you what happened in Harvard. Yes. Well, in fact, it was a great experience when President Macri was the mayor in the city of Buenos Aires in the last 8 years previous to the presidency. We started in that moment with this experience of creating a new ministry called modernization. Why modernization? Because in fact, in Argentina, the states in general, not only the national, but also the provinces and the municipalities, has a huge problem in terms of developing, in terms of performance, quality of service, IT, infrastructure, digitalization, connectivity in general. And of course, one of the biggest problems is what we call the public employment, all the support that we need in the States for giving a huge quality of service. So that's the reason why in the city of Buenos Aires we created this ministry, and we started working in a way, in an integrated way, based in the different areas, not only innovation, but also infrastructure and public employment. With that experience, based on the experience of the city of Buenos Aires, the president decided to create this ministry that also give you the possibility of optimize cost, saving costs, synergies in the different areas. Imagine that you have a lot of areas, more than 20 areas, with different goals or objectives in terms of IT, in terms of develop digital platforms, and the idea that you can synergy and control the different areas allows you to give or to optimize the different initiatives. Today we have 5 big areas working together with the rest of the government based on, first, human resources, second, e-government, third, digitalization and innovation, fourth, open government and open data, and the fifth is what we call now along the country, in the national state, in the national public sector, a digital country. That is to give to the provinces and municipalities the possibility of this transformation. We need to transform the concept and the state in Argentina according to what is happening in the rest of the world, according to what is happening in the wave of the IT, and we need to make this real breakthrough in terms of transformation. Because in the last decades in Argentina, in general, the public states have been a poor quality of service, and the demand and the needs of the citizens are needs of the 21st century, and in many times we say that we have states or public sectors of the 20th century, or in many cases, 19th century. So there is a gap, a very important gap that we have to solve, and the idea is to make this synergy in order to produce this huge transformation. So I don't know if I can explain to you what is modernization, but in general terms, it's this.
When we talk about modernization, one of the big challenges for Argentina and for most Latin American countries, and that's something that Julio Frenk, as president of will be interested in, is isolation, the fact that our countries are not very connected to the rest of the world. What is Argentina doing to get out of its academic isolation. And let me just throw a figure at you. Last year, there were 328,000 students from China in US colleges. Okay, China is a huge country. But let's go down the list. 165,000 students from India. 21,000 students from Vietnam in American colleges. 19,000 from Brazil. And fewer than 5,000, 4,000 from Argentina. In other words, and this is not only an Argentine problem, Mexico is right next to the US and has fewer students in US colleges than Vietnam, a communist-ruled country that is across the world. So what is Argentina doing to break its academic isolation?
Well, good question. Okay, first of all, I will start with the general concept. In fact, we had a decade of darkness in general terms. Public policies, our connection, or
you're talking about the Christina Kirchner years.
Sorry?
You're talking about the Christina Kirchner years.
Yes. The previous period that we started with in this new stage, the government of Macri, the previous decade was really bad in terms of connection and integration with the world, relationships with the different countries, the economy, closed economy, and as I told you before, this concept of darkness in terms of the state, giving information, open data. Since President Macri started with the gestion in December of 2015, so 1 year and a half, we started with a strong policy of openness in relationship with the world. Imagine that the presidents of the different countries and our president going to other countries with president of Spain, Italy, China, Japan, United States, all the region, Chile, Uruguay, and the rest of the region, trying to improve our relationship and, of course, open the economy in reasonable terms because we had this very bad experience. And, of course, when you start working in this way, the impact that produces in the different areas, in education, in entrepreneurship, in business in general, in IT, is what we are trying to develop with the different communities. So, in particular, in the case of education, the flow between students that come into Argentina and go from Argentina to the rest of the world, it'll increase. And maybe next question I can explain to you some other experience associated to our public sector, because we have a specific institute of capacitation, of training and capacitation, and we are open this institute in order to improve our human resources, to improve the education and the training of our human resources. But let me tell you that in general, if you have a concept of open mind, the effects you will see in the different areas, in education, in business, and in the rest of the areas, in policy in general. And our concept is this, is to interact with the rest of the world in general terms, taking advantage of the expertise in technology and in different areas, and of course, providing to the rest of the world our expertise, and this is the general concept in which we are working on, or we are going on. Yeah?
Dr. Frenk, you know Latin America. Does this work? Okay. You know Latin America very well. You have been Minister of Health in Mexico. You were dean at Harvard, and you perhaps are one of the few presidents of American universities who's deeply connected with the region. And you have this new project to turn the University of Miami into a hemispheric innovation and education center. Explain to us what your plans are.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Andres. And I'm delighted to be back in eMerge. The University of Miami has very much been part of supporting this great vision of Manny Medina's. You know, the university was founded in 1925, so, you know, it's 92 years old now. We're heading towards our centennial. And from the beginning, the University of Miami was called a Pan-American university. That was the vision from the first, literally the first moment of the university, a Pan-American university. But there was never a strategy. You know, by being located in Miami, you had all of this influence and capacity to influence the region, but there was not a strategy. And I was brought here very much with the idea of continuing to be a global university, which we are. We have students from 100 countries. We have faculty members from and researchers from more than 50 countries. But what we have is a true hemispheric advantage, meaning that we have a geographic endowment because we are located in this city of Miami, which is one of the most cosmopolitan cities, the crossroads of the Americas. So from the time I arrived almost 2 years ago, I've been talking about making the University of Miami the hemispheric university. And that requires a strategy. The strategy has five pillars. The first is the study of the hemisphere. And we've just before I arrived, the university created the Miami Institute for Advanced Study of the Americas by merging the Center for Latin American Studies and a Center for Hemispheric Policy, both to do research about the hemisphere and convening of business and policy leaders. The second big pillar is taking student exchange to a much more structured level. And the vehicle for that is something we're calling a proposal to create a hemispheric university consortium, a consortium of a limited number of universities throughout the hemisphere, from Canada to the southern tip of Argentina, and allow for a strong level of mobility among students, a sort of Erasmus project of the Americas. Of course, we don't have the transborder mobility of the European Union, but the same philosophy that if you get students to share a common educational experience, you will be able to build a sort of hemispheric or global citizenship. And that's the idea of the Hemispheric University Consortium. That is also the vehicle, the consortium, for the third pillar, which is the collaboration among researchers. We already do a lot of that, but in a more or less spontaneous, disorganized manner, and the idea is to be more strategic. And then the fourth is very important for eMerge. And it's the fourth pillar is around technological innovation. Playing our role as a university to make Miami the hemispheric innovation hub. And maybe we can talk a little bit more of what would be required, because this is a vision that's widely shared by many people, business leaders, government leaders, civic leaders, and universities have a crucial role to play. Every successful innovation hub has a comprehensive research university at its core, and the University of Miami is exactly that, a comprehensive research university. So the fourth pillar of our hemispheric university, hemispheric strategy, is the idea of a hemispheric innovation hub with a strong participation from the University of Miami. And then the last one, the fifth pillar, is around healthcare. We're on a huge academic health system called UHealth, where we get and see patients from all over the region, but to turn that into a much more strategic approach for linking with health systems throughout the region. So those are the five big elements of the hemispheric strategy of the University of Miami.
Dr. Frenk, but how can the University of Miami and other American universities keep up and increase student exchanges, joint degrees, collaboration, at a time when President Trump is cutting by 50% his proposed budget for 2018, calls for budget cuts of 50% in foreign aid educational exchanges and cultural exchanges. How can American universities do what you want to do in this climate?
Well, that is a challenge. And I think universities need to emphasize the notion that a great source of strength for the United States is to continue to be a magnet for talent. It is the capacity to attract the best and brightest, whether it's students, researchers, innovators, that is a huge source of strength. And although that is a budget proposal, it has to go through Congress, and our expectation is that will be substantially changed, because there's also devastating cuts for research funding, which would completely undermine the capacity of the United States to compete globally and would reduce what's been the main source of prosperity for the United States, which is the investment in research. So I do very much expect that the budget that will come out will be different. But emphasizing the idea that being a magnet for talent, attracting the best and brightest, is actually a source of strength, I think is important. On our part, we have students, as I said, from 100 countries, including a lot of those Chinese students that you mentioned. We have a lot of students from China, from India, from the Middle East, and a growing number of students from Latin America and the Caribbean. We have embarked in a very intense campaign to disseminate the notion that our students are welcome here, that this is a welcoming university that celebrates diversity. And I think if we build an instrument like a university, hemispheric university consortium, and seek diverse sources of funding for that, I think we can mitigate the effects of measures like the ones you're describing. But there is a big space here for cooperation, for other investors, including private investors, and including philanthropic approaches. Because I do think also that there's a critical mass of people in the Americas that understand that the only way we'll be able to deal with stereotypes and prejudice is to build a global citizenship like the Erasmus project did in Europe. That's exactly what we need to do now. Students arrive to university exactly at the same age in which they become citizens. And if we allow them to share a common educational experience by building a consortium of the sort that we are talking about, I think we greatly increase our opportunity for a much more open, less prejudiced set of interactions. And I think at this point, universities really need to play the role as exemplary institutions that show to the rest of society that actually we can pursue enlightened pathways of using reason and science to deal with the most pressing problems of our times.
Minister Ibarra, your thoughts? Because to do an Erasmus, which is Europe's exchange program of joint degrees and student exchanges, you need to have agreements with foreign universities. Last time I checked in Argentina, the University of Buenos Aires didn't have any joint degree, zero. Maybe that has changed. That was like 5 years ago. Zero. Not one single joint degree with any foreign university. Maybe that has changed again.
In particular to this, I want to underline one concept that is associated with what I have told a few minutes before. We are going in Argentina in a new way, in a way of confidence. We need to increase our confidence with the rest of the world, not only for investment in general, but also for education, for innovation, and the rest of the activities. This implies that the rest of the world have to trust in Argentina in order to understand that there are new rules. It's a new way with an enormous respect to the institutions, the general rules for the economy, for instance, with a new economic policy based on the previsibility. So we are in the middle in a big change, a real breakthrough, like I told you before, because in the last decade, we were closed to the world without a good integration, and we need to change everything in each area. Of course, in the institutional area in general, but also in the economy, and of course, when we are working and we are talking about education, we are talking about the universities, and we need to improve in this area. We are working in the cabinet of Mr. President Macri, trying to really to make big transformations in the areas, and in particular in education. Imagine that we have along the country a cruel situation in many aspects. I can give you some idea about what is Argentina today. In Argentina, we have more than 2,200 municipalities, small towns. When you go to all these towns, more than 90% of that small towns, less than 10,000 or 15,000 inhabitants, they don't have connectivity. When I go to the municipalities and I see, okay, how it's working in terms of connectivity, gestion systems, they don't have anything. No, they don't have websites, they don't have emails. So we are working in a real revolution in order to change all this situation. So if we can find all this situation, that in other aspect, on the other hand, is a big opportunity for the rest of for the community trying to make business, to introduce IT. So the same case with the education and the rest of the areas. So we have a big challenge in order to change the situation in Argentina. And of course, the education is not out of this general situation. But let me tell you that we are going on a strong work in this area, and the human resources in Argentina are very, very, they have many opportunities in the world due to the capacity, and you can see in the different universities around the world, we have strong human resources in these, professionals with degrees, with masters, with, and they have a notable situation in each case. But let me tell you that we have to transform the Argentina in general in the different areas. So that's the reason that in many cases we can find all these tragic situations, no? And we are in the middle of this process of transformation.
What can Argentina do to promote this culture of innovation we were talking about earlier?
Well,
what can a government do?
Okay. First of all, the government, we think that the role of the public sector is very, very important as a facilitator for the rest of the policies. So we have the specific experience in the city of Buenos Aires and now in the national government. We are working with the idea of, in fact, there is one specific policy, the open data and open government. We are developing around the country what we call hackathons in the different matters, in agroindustria, in banks, in financial, in technology, with the idea of the state has the role of a facilitator. It's impossible to develop each application, prototype. So we are in the middle of a strong commitment with the civil society in order to produce this interaction between the state and the civil society. in the state, we have created labs in which we try to produce interchange between the different areas and trying to produce innovation and creation as I told you, in the different areas. And we are promoting through the different states in Argentina the idea of collaboration. Now we are working with the OECD and with the World Bank trying to implement the third national plan with different commitments in the different areas, and of course all these commitments are public, but basically with the idea of promoting the interaction between state and civil society.
Dr. Frenk, and the same question to you, Minister Ibarra. What additional steps can Miami take to become more of a center of innovation than it already is? What would you recommend?
You know, since I arrived here, in my interactions, both with our own faculty, our researchers, our alumni, but also with the business, civic, and government leaders, I think there's a huge consensus that the next big step of economic development for Miami, after tourism and real estate and financial services, and increasingly arts and entertainment, the next big step is innovation, technological innovation. And as I was saying before, every successful innovation hub has a comprehensive research university at its core. So we are playing that role. We've created something called Innovate, our innovation initiative. The university itself mobilizing its own talent, the talent from its own faculty and researchers, has now about 50 startups in different stages. But we've also created an ecosystem of partnerships because we think this is has to come with partnerships. A big one is that we've transformed our life sciences and technology park, a very interesting development, into Converge Miami. That's the new branding, in a partnership with the Cambridge Innovation Center and Wexford Scientific. In fact, several of our own startups are housed there. And on July 1st, just in a few days, we are going to launch Converge Labs, which is going to be the first shared lab space in South Florida, open not just to the University of Miami, but research from other universities and other parts. We've also started a partnership between our Center for Computational Sciences and the Fast Track Institute, with the idea of building, a computational science for the Americas, and with a strong focus, for example, on smart cities. We're very invested in entrepreneurial education, so we created Launchpad, which is directed to students and alumni. About 4,400 clients have used the services of Launchpad, and this has now been adopted by a number of universities, of other universities, the idea of the Launchpad. More than 460 companies have been launched at the Launchpad. And then we've embraced, of course, eMerge, which is the embodiment of this idea of the future of Miami under the leadership of Manny Medina. And we've been in conversation with him on the possibility of making eMerge a permanent feature through the Innovation Center of the Americas. And we want to play a very central role in all of that. So there is, along with other players, I think there's a momentum growing. And the key thing is we gotta have this comprehensive research university. This is not a university in Miami, this is the University of Miami. And we're gonna play that role. I invite everyone to visit our booth, which is focused on smart cities, the environment, and healthcare. And that shows some of what we're doing here to be part of this larger ecosystem. In the end, Andres, I was listening to your comments, and I've read and studied your book. I think we can play a major role because of our geographic endowment. There is a critical mass of inventors, scientists, engineers in Latin America. But a lot of the other elements of the innovation ecosystem are missing. The regulatory burdens are huge. I'm glad to see Argentina is now modernizing in that sense, but we gotta do. Access to venture capital is limited. If you want to do an IPO, There's very few, there's no NASDAQ that I'm aware of. Access to markets is also constrained. And I think, and the culture, the veneration, I think Miami, because of its geographic location at the crossroads, can provide all of those other elements of the innovation ecosystem and truly become a magnet for the innovators that are throughout our region and create not only the critical mass, but the critical density. Remember, innovation is a contact sport. You need to have the contact. And the place where we all gather, like we're here today, is Miami. So this is, to me, the future of the city, and this is the future of the University of Miami.
Mr. Ibarra, I'm told we have to wind up, but I wanted to give you the last answer. As Argentina also wants to be an innovation center, what are you doing, like Miami is doing, to get Argentina to be at least a regional innovation center?
Well, first of all, as I tried to explain, we're in the middle of a revolution, a breakthrough, in terms of the general behavior and the public gestion due to we received a real disaster in terms of what was working with the state, and we are transforming the state in terms of an e-transaction state with innovation, with a digital platform. Imagine that we are trying to become the old state based on paper, all the transactions based on paper, through a new paperless state with the e-transactions, with the digital platform, with other concepts like cybersecurity. Now we are launching a new bid for assure all the systems of the general state with a new concept in cybersecurity, all the new platform with the idea of having the online transactions with the city, also with the citizens. We have launched in the last month a new purchase system, online purchase system, the same for biddings, for public sector biddings. With more in the last months, we are up to the 1.5 million e-transactions, when in the previous period everything was paper, without the electronic transactions, the digital platforms. We are renewing, we are going on with a new concept of the new state in Argentina. So based on that, with a strong public sector, we can start a new way in terms of transformation and innovation. If you have the tools for doing this, you can be in the middle of our society trying to push the innovation along the country with the different provinces, in the different municipalities, because without this, if you don't have the tools, if you don't have a strong public sector, it's impossible to push the society or to make those partnerships between the public sector and the civil society. Because we are very, very optimistic. The Argentina is changing in these ways. We are integrated. We're trying to integrate to the world. We are making confidence. And in my case, with the modernization process and with the modernization plan, we are trying to transform Argentina with these new tools for giving to the economy another speed and what we call a difficult word, what is desburocratizar. We are trying to simplify all the transactions between the state and the civil society, with the companies and with the persons. So we are in the middle of this process. We are very optimistic, and we have a very important advance in the last month.
Mr. Ibarra, President Frenk, thank you very much. And we all wish you lots of luck, all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.